So Floyd Prozanski, as I said, state senator. So District 4 has changed significantly since I first started representing the district. It currently includes half of Eugene, all of Springfield, and a little rural area to the south. Previous to that, I had all of East Lane County, all of East Douglas County, North Central Douglas County, and I've lost all of that area because of redistricting based on the population from the census. Everything in the way of districts had to move north, and so that took me out of that southern and eastern area to make population for other districts. I serve in on the Senate Judiciary Committee as the chair of the committee. I've had the opportunity and the fortunate support of my leadership to allow me to be there since 2009 as the chair. I have 21 years now in the Senate and 7 years previous to that over a 9-year period in the House. And the other committees that I serve on is the Natural Resource and Wildfires, as well as the Human Services in the Senate. I also chair the Senate Conduct Committee, as well as the co-chairing the Joint Committee on Conduct. The last committee I co-chair is one dealing with addiction and recovery that we have set up. So that's kind of just a quick background on me and what where I'm at and what our services. We'll go into much more detail later, but let's let Lisa have her opportunity.
Thank you, Senator. Well, it's great to be here with you today. Thank you all so much for coming. This is actually one of my favorite parts of doing this job, is getting to connect with people in the community. So my name is Lisa Fragala, and I represent House District 8, which basically goes, I like to say, from the Willamette River to Spencer Butte, but it also includes part of the Crow Applegate Lorraine Valley and a chunk across the river where Outson Stadium is, all those apartments over there, because the U of O is in my district, and in redistricting, they felt that it was important that that community be contiguous to the university neighborhood. So this is my first term serving. So I am a new member of the House Legislature, and I'm very honored to be there serving our community. I currently serve on the Labor and Workplace Standards Board, which I'm thrilled to be a part of and get to think about advocating for working people and working families. I also serve on higher education and workforce development. So that is an opportunity for me to advocate for higher education and good career pathways for people. And the Labor Committee and the Higher Ed Committee give me an opportunity to do that at an intersection with apprenticeship models, which is something I'm also very passionate about. The third committee that I serve on is Housing and Homelessness. It is quite a large committee because it is a priority of the governor as well as a priority of the Democratic caucus. And I can say that it's also, there's a lot of bipartisan work happening in that committee because it is such a priority. And I feel very fortunate to get to serve on that committee because I know from talking to people during my campaign that those two issues are one of the most important in this community, and that it also impacts a lot of the other work that we're doing. So those are the committees that I'm serving on, and thank you for being here today, and I'm excited to hear about the issues that are important to you and to hear what you're thinking as well. Whatever we wanted to talk about some of the legislation.
So we're kind of huddled here as to how best to do this. We know you have questions. We want to take those on. At the same time, it may be worth us giving you a little bit of understanding of some of the bills that are being worked right now so you can kind of understand. One thing that I would strongly urge you to do is make sure, if you haven't signed up and if you want to be on our newsletters, Lisa and I both put out monthly newsletters, and you'll get information through that process. And you can also learn of the OLIS, which is the Oregon Legislative Information System. It's our database that we use for the legislature, And if there's particular bills that you find yourself interested in, you can actually sign up to be notified if there's any movement or changes on those bills. The last thing I forgot to mention to you is that I do have a day job. As you know, the legislature is not a full-time job. And so my job here back in the community, I serve as a prosecuting attorney. My work, I've now done prosecution work in Lane County, meaning generally, for about 37 years. The vast majority of it's at the city level. I am an independent contractor at this point. So I have contracts with the city of Eugene, city of Florence, and a quasi-contract with the city of Springfield. I will admit to you, since COVID, I've not done much work for Eugene or Springfield. My main contract is with the city of Florence, which I've served as their prosecutor since '95. Prior to that, I was in the DA's office for 4 years before I got elected into the legislature, and basically elected myself out of my job because all of a sudden I was in 2 branches of state government. So that's why I've gone back to contract work, and it gives me the ability to be on the ground in the community as well. So as the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, one of the bills that I am brought forward, it's a committee bill, but we basically used that to bring other concepts together. The Senate Bill 243, and the -4s. It's known as the Oregon Suicide Prevention and Community Safety Firearms Act. And basically what this bill does has 3 components to it. The first is to reduce impulse buying of weapons. The data shows us very clearly that if individuals are, one, contemplating suicide, or if they are in a rage of emotions over maybe a domestic or whatever, if you can keep those individuals from having access to firearms for a 48-hour period, you can actually give them a chance to take a deep breath and rethink what they're about to do. And so we're moving that forward. So it has that component in it. It also has a prohibition on rapid fire activator. So you've heard about bump stocks and some of the other things that will actually increase the rate that you can actually fire bullets out of a gun. That would be prohibited. And then the last is local control. And this would be to bring back to communities in the cities, at the city level and at the county level, for them to be able to have more control over where concealed weapons can be brought into public buildings. And this is one of those ones that we already have this at the state level. The Capitol used to be open, meaning anyone can just come in with a firearm. We used to have hearings on gun and firearm related bills, and I would tell you that half the room definitely was carrying weapons at the time. We had people walking the halls with AR-15s, and that was allowed in our state legislature or in our capital up until about 2, maybe 3 years ago. And then since then we now have metal detectors and such. So what we feel is that this is something that the local community should have the opportunity to address if they want to. Doesn't force anybody to do anything, but it would hold them accountable because they would be making decisions at the local level. And of course, their constituents could say yay or nay to their actions. One bill that Lisa and I are working on together, and I do want to recognize that we have former State Representative Paul Hovey in the back of the room. Paul started this act. Now, he thinks he gets out of this, but he's not. So we have what's called Senate Bill 426. 426 is dealing with wage theft. Paul was I'm going to say the pioneer of the legislators who was pushing this concept for over 6 years, trying to get a law on the books that would actually hold general contractors and owners accountable for their hires. So if they subcontract out for someone to do work, and then those individuals don't pay their workers, that the workers have an ability to get paid for the job they did. And so there's basically pushed back to the level of the owner or the general contractor, the responsibility for making certain these people are paid and that they are in the position to be able to hold their hires, meaning the subcontractors, accountable for those acts.
You mean the homeowner would be responsible?
No, there's actually, thank you for the question. The question is, would homeowners be responsible for this type of activity? They will not be. We put an exemption and exceptions into the bill, and that's one of the areas that we did. So on your primary residence, you would not, you were exempted from the bill. Now, if you were somebody that had 3 or 4 or 5 different homes, the other secondary homes could be impacted, but not your primary residence. The other one that I guess I'm going to mention to you is Senate Bill 430, and this is dealing with unexpected costs that are put onto your bill if you're buying something online. So if you go online and you're going through checking the boxes, oh yeah, I want to buy this. What has happened, and this happened to me, this is how I became aware of it, after I made the purchase and said, confirm, I want to buy this, and here's the price, which was supposed to be $8. And then all of a sudden afterwards it came back and says, yes, congratulations, you're confirmed, the sale has just taken place. Oh, by the way, we put a $10 charge on top of that for service. And that's called drip charging and drip pricing. And I talked to the Attorney General's office about this, and they made it very clear that it's not illegal for them to do what they're doing. And so we have a bill that we're moving through the process that would in fact not allow for that to occur. All it would require is that whoever's selling is to let you know when you hit confirm, I want to purchase, you know exactly what you're paying for that item. Now there are some exceptions such as taxes and shipping costs that could not be made you're aware of, but they still have to disclaim it, that these are things that you would potentially be. But as I think most of us have used online shopping, I'm really surprised at how quickly it actually changes. One of the things I was on that said, do you want a shopping bag? That would be 5 cents more. And I said no, and then it adjusted the price. And so they can do this, and what we just want to make certain is consumers know exactly what they're going to be paying before they say confirm, and they're on the hook for the payment. I'll stop with that and let Lisa have an opportunity to talk about some of hers.
Thank you so much, Senator. So I'm guessing a lot of people probably know this already, but I'll say it again. My background is as an educator. I taught in schools locally for close to 25 years, primarily kindergarten and second grade. And then I worked in higher education at Pacific University in the College of Education. I think I may be one of the only state representatives that has a background in both K-12 and higher education. It's a little unusual for me to not be serving on the K-12 Education Committee in the House, but I still do a lot of work through that committee. And so one of the priorities that I have for this session is, has already been successfully moving through the Senate and the House, and that is investments in summer learning programs for our schools and for our students. And we know that that investment is really critical for closing some of the gaps that we have and making sure students are successful in our schools. I also am looking at ensuring that our workforce in education, both at the K-12 level and in higher ed, is supported and is a robust workforce, right? I personally know, working at Pacific University, that educators are leaving the profession in droves. They have been since the pandemic, and we need to make sure that we have enough teachers in schools. And so investments in things like teacher apprenticeship programs are something that I have been working on, as well as a bill that looks at how we support the healthcare professionals that are in our schools. We have lots of healthcare professionals like OTs, PTs, nurses, and school psychs, and we can't keep them in our schools because of the need to address how they orient within a school setting, right? Their professional licensing isn't well coordinated or articulated for education environments. I'm also working on another bill that looks at the same thing with classified employees, ensuring that their positions are well articulated, throughout the state and assuring that they're paid adequately for the role that they do, the hard work that they do in our schools. And we know that school districts are also facing a challenge with maintaining this workforce, right? At any given time, you can look at the 4J website and you will see open positions for classified employees, especially in special education. So I also have a climate education bill. Environmental issues are really important to me. My undergraduate degree is actually in environmental science and wildlife biology. That was some time ago, but that's what brought me to Oregon, and it will always be a touchstone for me. And so I successfully just moved a climate education bill through the House floor, and it's on its way to the Senate. It's very exciting for me. It integrates climate goals and climate science and resiliency goals and objectives into state standards. It's not a new curriculum. There's no fiscal burden on school districts. We know that we need to be thoughtful about not giving schools unfunded mandates. This uses systems already in place and integrates it into the processes and structures that are already in place. I've also been working on another bill with Senator Prozanski that is a conservation lot bill with the Mackenzie River Trust, and it's very focused on removing barriers to conservation practices to support our drinking water sources like the Mackenzie River. This is something that the Mackenzie River Trust has been working on with eWeb, and I want to make sure that we have access to good drinking water and protect those resources. That one has already come out of the House and gone to the Senate and was actually in Senator Prozanski's Committee on Environment and Natural Resources and Environment. I'm new, so I'm still learning. So those are a couple of bills that I'm working on personally, as well as the wage theft bill. I'm really excited to have that come over to the House and have personally talked with people in our community and throughout the state who have been impacted by this practice. People who have done an honest day's work and not received pay. And it has a significant impact on people. Some people have become unhoused, people have families, young children to support, and I really believe that if you do a day's labor, you should get paid for your work. And that is really what is at the heart of this legislation. A last piece of legislation that I want to mention that I have been working on with the House Majority Leader and that I'm a chief co-sponsor of is the corporate practice of medicine. This is an attempt to address the vertical integration of our healthcare system. How many people are familiar with what happened with Optum and United Healthcare in our community? Yeah, I figured it would be a lot. I've talked to so many people. This is working to address that issue specifically, right? We know when there's vertical integration in our healthcare system that costs increase, access declines, and the quality of care declines. I literally was just speaking with a mental health care provider right before I came over here who told me that the mental health care group or agency that she was working with had also been bought by Optum. 12 out of 15 of those mental health care providers left because it was not a good work environment for them, and often healthcare providers feel like they are violating their oath to work with the best intention of the patient. So that bill is very personal to me. I personally did not have a primary care provider when I was diagnosed with breast cancer in the summer of 23. And I am really committed to making sure that our personal health doesn't become an issue that is for profit. I think that's really scary when you start to think about it. If our health becomes something for profit, then us being unhealthy actually becomes profitable. And I want to make sure that we have access to affordable healthcare in our communities, that is quality healthcare, and where the decisions are being made between a physician and the patient, not by a corporation for profit. So excited to be working on that bill. It's coming from the Senate to the House. And I believe we have a public hearing scheduled on it very soon. So looking forward to hearing your thoughts and your questions. You want me to just, who would like to ask a question? Yes, right here.
I always have questions. What can be worked out between the state and the federal, what's going on right now? Is the state able to pass a lot of these bills and have them stand when the feds want to take it away?
Did people hear the question? It's addressing the context at the federal level, I'll say the chaos at the federal level, and the ways in which certain state practices and rights are being potentially undermined. Do you want me to go first on that?
Sure.
So I can speak to that from a higher education perspective and a little bit about what I know is going on in the House. We are seeing a lot of targeting of higher education institutions, particularly universities, but also K-12, with the threats of withdrawing threats of withdrawing funding. And in the higher education committee that I serve on, I would say on a daily basis we are hearing Republican colleagues attack diversity, equity, and inclusion within the higher education system. And so this is something that is becoming more vocal in Oregon, but it is a direct kind of reference to what is happening at the national level, right? This is where the federal government is targeting education. And I think it's very politicized, and I really think it's about erasing people, erasing them in terms of their history and their presence. For example, with the Tuskegee Airmen being erased from the website and no longer that information is accessible. But I also think it's very political in terms of undermining our education institutions. And so what are we doing about it at the state level? I'll let the good senator speak more to the legal jurisprudence part of it because that is his area. But in the House and around education, we are making sure that we continue to protect the programs that we need to protect our sanctuary laws, protect our laws that protect the GLBTQT and trans communities, and to ensure that we are also coordinating with efforts at the state level to support our education institutions. A lot of that work needs to happen at the legal level, but we're also working to make sure that we support the agencies that need to manage these attacks. So for example, I recently worked as the vice chair of the higher education committee in the House with some of the agency people in the HEC, which is the Higher Education Coordinating Council, to change language around grant opportunities for diverse communities, which I just want to point out, diverse communities, when you look at it in this environment, is about people who are from lower socioeconomic communities. They are rural communities and frontier communities. They include veterans, and then they include historically marginalized communities, right? No, people are not being excluded in this process, which is the claim that will be made. But working to change the language so that it passes legal muster and passing bills to ensure that our agencies are still able to support these different types of grants and this different type of work that they're doing.
All right. So, most of you know we have states' rights. Article 10 of the U.S. Constitution preserves to the state certain components of what we have the ability to control and do. Health and education, safety is those in those areas. What the state is doing is we are seeing all three branches of government, the legislature, the judicial branch, and the executive branch, all working together to ensure the rights that we have here in Oregon are not going to be trampled on by the federal government. We have status in this state as a sanctuary state, and this is one of the areas that the federal administration is really starting to focus on, and we expect and anticipate that we'll see more direct actions toward us and other sanctuary states. But what I'm going to tell you is that Dan Rayfield, who is our Attorney General, has already entered into numerous lawsuits with a bunch of other Attorney Generals around the country taking on a lot of this approach. One of the things that's very important to me is to ensure that we are not going to lose those rights that we have, the protections. As I mentioned to you, I work as a prosecuting attorney, have done so for 37 years, and I can tell you my working with the individuals who represent law enforcement at the legislature, everyone is on the same page. And that is that we have an Oregon law that says this, and we are not going to go forward and support federal actions that interfere with our rights as state citizens. Most of us have heard about the gentleman that was deported to El Salvador, Mr. Garcia. How many people heard this last week of a man named Mr. Lopez who lived in Georgia, who was a U.S. citizen, born here, lived here for 2 years, moved to Mexico and lived there for 14 years, came back when he's age 16. He now lives where he was born, meaning in Georgia. He was going across the state border with Florida. Florida has adopted some law that says that if you somehow come into the U.S. and then you are illegally in the country and you come into Florida, you violate another law. Now, whether or not that's going to be legal or not, as to my perspective, is that immigration laws are preempted at the federal level and the states can't do that. Let's just put that to the side for a moment. This gentleman was a passenger in a vehicle, gets pulled over because the driver was speeding. He ends up getting picked up and taken into custody. He was there for 48 hours, an American citizen. That's how bad it's going to get. We are going to see more pain and more hurt. And this is where we, as a community, need to stand together for all of us. Because if you say, well, that doesn't really bother me or not bother me, it doesn't pertain to me because that's not what I do. Just remember, if we don't stand for united for everybody, who's going to stand for us?
Yep.
That's right. So we're doing everything we can. Can we anticipate each and everything? No, we can't. The place where we have to have our hope is, as I said, there are three branches of government. We see right now the executive branch on the federal side is not really doing much of anything. They're starting to kind of wake up a little bit because their constituents, even in red states, are calling out their representatives, their congresspeople, for the acts that are happening at the federal level in the administration. So what we do need to make certain is that we don't allow these type of intimidations to override what we know is right as citizens and the protection for all of us. So we're going to do everything we can, and we're going to react as we need to react, but the courts, the branch that is one that's going to hold the checks and balances. This is why legislation, when you have legislators that want to do what I call flip-flop, move from 180 to another back 180, those things don't happen, or they do happen, they don't last, because our whole system is based on checks and balances. And the judicial branch is now starting to stand up for what is right. If you start looking at some of the stuff, I was kind of saying, well, it's got to be coming soon. Now you have the federal government, you have the federal administration, you have the president and his individuals that are denying that court orders mean what court orders say. And this is why we're seeing pushback across the country. I think we all as Americans, and I think we all as Oregonians, want to make certain the rule of law stays in place. And we cannot just have someone say, I'm just not going to follow that. The chaos will be here and it will be bad. So let me get off my soapbox.
Good job.
And just say we're going to do everything we can to prohibit that type of interference. And what I will tell you about the law enforcement is that they have told me they are going to support the state law, the sanctuary that we have in place, and they are not going to do what Florida did. They held this person because ICE said, oh, we want to put a hold on them. And then they basically said, well, that's, we can't stop that. That's why we have a sanctuary law here, because we say we have different values to support our citizens. Question? If you'll stand up so we can hear your question.
I was wondering what our state and other states can do to protect ourselves from losing the right to vote because of the VOTE Act. In terms of married women whose original name doesn't match their current name, and minorities who can't afford passports and things like that. What will we do to protect ourselves in terms of potentially 70+ million people losing the right to vote?
Yeah, so I'm going to take on the perspective of what I feel we can do at the state level as to this, as to what might be happening on the federal litigation, legislation side. We clearly have done everything we can in the state of Oregon to make voting access as easy as possible to get people the opportunity to participate. And we have checks and balances there too. Yes, there have been some individuals through the motor enrollment through when you go to DMV and get your license and stuff, you automatically get registered to vote at the same time. Those have checks and balances. Fortunately, we've been able to hold those in place. Yes, my understanding, there's been a few individuals who did unlawfully vote. They are supposed to be getting investigated. Regarding what happens on the federal level as to them putting more and more restrictions, I'll be very frank with you. Even as an attorney, I don't know what is going to be the outcome of a federal law as to how it would impact citizens in any state as to what they do. I would assume that we would have some type of litigation based on the rights of individuals to seek redress through voting in the country. Now, but I can't tell you exactly. I'm not real familiar with the SAVE Act. I understand about the names and going through some type of verification process. But I'm not as familiar with that, so I don't want to try to expel on that without having more information. But what I will tell you is that anything that we have that's at the state level and at the local level within the state will not, as far as I can see, be impacted by a federal legislation as to state and local voting.
Yeah, thank you for that question. That is the cornerstone and foundation of our democracy, right? That people are able to vote. And, I'll just reiterate one of the things that Senator Prozanski said, which maybe I will try the clip. We'll see how that goes. Which is that one of the perspectives that our leadership in the House has been taking, and they are, of course, coordinating with our state leadership and with leadership in the Senate, is that there's emergency response or planning mentality to what we're experiencing at the federal level, right? And so very, very soon after Trump was elected, it wasn't, people didn't wait until January or February when all of this started happening. They went to work in November planning, right? Evaluating where the vulnerabilities are, just like you do for any type of emergency planning. Looking at agencies to see what agencies might be most specifically targeted. Developing scenario planning. And just like the Attorney General, Dan Rayfield, meets on a daily call and has been working with attorney generals in blue states, progressive attorney generals, since November to coordinate around protecting our rights. The governors are doing that, and our state leadership is doing that. And in the House, we are committed to protecting the rights and the programs that serve Oregonians, right? Our sanctuary laws, we're committed to upholding those, as well as upholding other basic rights and freedoms that we know are the values of Oregonians. So that is something that is happening comprehensively and strategically, and we have to stay focused, right? We can't be responding to everything that comes out of the White House. That just makes us spin out and not be very effective. We have to look and be strategic at what is actually happening and what are the things that we can protect and do. And so we know that part of the federal administration's strategy is something called flooding the zone, which is something Bannon has talked about, which is sowing confusion and chaos and doing that in a way to undermine effective strategic governance or responses. So we are working very hard to be strategic and coordinated and to protect the programs and rights of Oregonians. One other thing that I would mention in relation to voting rights is that there are efforts at the state level by Republicans to undermine the voting system that we have in Oregon. There is a ballot initiative that sounds like it will be on the ballot to do away with vote by mail. And so that is something that is incredibly popular, but I don't think we should take it for granted. So again, knowing what the struggles are, knowing what the fights are, and there will be an opportunity for our community to stand up for access to voting by mail and making sure we have a strong democratic process in Oregon.
I have a list.
Okay, so let's start with one.
Let's start with one. Oh,
What?
No, I'm just kidding. Becky is with the League of
League of
Women
Women
Voters.
Voters.
She's one of our
certified domestic terrorist because I support voting rights
Yeah.
and transparency. Okay, I'll make this quick. Senate Bill 430, I looked at that. I read all the testimony in opposition, in support, and I was a little concerned. One of them said that it might be hard for small businesses to address each of the different jurisdictions or states or whatever that might vary and not be consistent. And I thought I would hold off a little bit until I could ask about details for that. But of course, the League is very interested in transparency and efficiency in government and so forth. I went into that thinking, oh yeah, we're going to support this. And I thought, let's find out, if it's a little more complicated, so maybe we can follow up on that. The other one is 1191, which is Senator Manning's bill of protecting the right to know from the people, particularly people who support the right to know, like us, with voting rights, that suddenly we would be domestic terrorists. And this, it's the flavor of the day almost. Oh, you're for DEI? We're going to get you. It's frightening. I'm really pleased to see that it's making strong headway. There was one in opposition out of 28, that was Senator Bonham. The one excused, Senator Woods, of course, sadly. Also, I wanted to ask about it looks like that one might be going through.
Which one?
Against vote by mail. I counted. I downloaded all of the OLIS testimonies and actually looked. Oh my God, there were over 14,000 pieces of submitted testimony for that. It's like obscene. How are your staff supposed to analyze that? Most of it was copy and paste, or just enough difference so that it wasn't quite copy and paste. On the other hand, those are not votes, and they are not moving the discussion further in a substantive way. So we're very concerned about effective communication, because we support that people should be able to communicate with you. But if I need to communicate with you that I have a personal wrong and I need my legislator help, you can't find it through all this other buzz that's going on. This is a long-term legitimate concern that's gotten worse very quickly. I am really concerned that you say you think it will pass.
I don't think it will
Well, you
pass.
don't think, I'm hearing aids.
I don't think it will pass, but I think people just need to be aware that there are attacks in our own state.
Okay.
Yeah.
There was one other, and I forgot what it is right now. Sorry.
So she asked about Senate Bill, say the number again?
There was 430.
Senate Bill 430.
430, which is transparency and understanding about those hidden charges. It was I think the first one you mentioned. And it might be a little bit complicated, which is, hello, we can handle this. We'll look at it, we'll understand it, and probably support it. The other one was 1191, which is I think Senator Manning's bill to protect people who are helping voters, the rest of us, know what our rights are, like understanding how to vote, like understanding DEI principles, like understanding transparency, like understanding what's going on with natural resources. Solar energy is taking a lot of hits, other things like that, which the League really supports. And suddenly we're going on a trip this summer. I want to come back into the country and not be on somebody's list. It's interesting times, and thank you for what you're doing.
So I'll let Senator Prozanski talk more about the Senate bills that you mentioned, but I did want to say that we are receiving huge amounts of emails on some very specific issues, and OLIS is also receiving huge numbers of testimony inputted, and we had a record number of bills this session. We actually had OLIS crash one day because so much testimony was uploaded to it. So that is something we're navigating in the state legislature and looking at addressing. I can, in terms of my own office, one of the things that I've really prioritized is constituent work and making sure that I stay in communication with constituents, but also support them when people have a challenge, right? I received a number of emails from local mental health providers about rulemaking that would decrease access in one of the state agencies, and I contacted the agency and discussed that process with them. I'm happy that they have reopened that rulemaking. They're slowing it down, and they're allowing more input on it. Even more recently, we've heard reports of people losing their SNAP benefits, their food stamp benefits, through fraud activities, where somebody has gotten access to their card and they lost $600, $700, $800 worth of their SNAP benefits, right? Families who really need access to those resources. So we're working with those families. So I guess the thing I want you to know is, yeah, we might get 1,000 emails on a topic, but I'm really looking to prioritize how I support and remain accessible to the constituents in my community. I recognize that decisions that I make impact the whole state and that there's a responsibility, but I'm there to serve this community, and I've made that a real priority of my office. And I just wanted to take a moment to introduce one of my staff people. It's Sabrina Gordon, and she works very hard as well to support people who are writing in with challenges that they might have. In terms of the attacks on local citizens in Oregon around being able to express their political opinions around the electoral process, I will stand against any of those attacks. And I'm not familiar with Senator Manning's bill. I don't think it's come over to the House yet. I haven't had the opportunity to look at it, but protecting our voting rights, protecting our democracy, as well as people who want to ensure that we have a robust democratic process, will be something that I will continue to stand strong on.
So I guess I'm just going to say we have staff. My staff, Kevin Moore, has been with me for 19 years. Lisa's other lead is Celine Swanson Harris. She worked with me prior to going to work with Lisa. Prior to that, she was with Senator Lee Byer. So we have very senior staff individuals that are there. And so we have a process of making certain that those who write to us that are constituents receive a priority, just for the simple influx of we represent these individuals, and that's who we need to have our focus on. I also say, because I chair the Senate Judiciary Committee, that we also take in those communications as best we can. So I feel that we're very cognizant of what's coming in. There's two individuals in the legislature, one in the Senate, one in the House, that have been very prolific in writing bills this time. David Brock Smith is the author of the one that would be challenging vote by mail. I can't say for sure, but I think he introduced over 300 different bills. 300, yes, that's right. And then Paul Evans, who's on the House side, he's done at least that many, if not more. The problem with that, of course, is we have limited resources ourselves. We don't draft our own bills in the sense we don't sit there and write them. We have a team of attorneys called Legislative Counsel who does all of our drafting of all of our proposed legislation. And you can only imagine if you have two people putting in 600 plus bills just between the two of them, the other 88 of us putting that's why we now hit these type of numbers. There is discussion right now. There's a bill on the House side that is getting some traction, I'm going to say, and some notification of maybe trying to limit the number of bills a representative or a senator can put in. We have short sessions in the even number of years. That's 35 days that we have to do our work. We're this year, odd number of years, we're in the long session, which is 160 days. As you can imagine, there's not a lot of time in the short sessions to be doing much in the way of legislation. So we actually enacted that we're limited to 2 personal bills to introduce for that. So I think you're going to see some limitations take place on the general long session. I don't think the number they have proposed right now is 25 will be the number we'll end up with. Because one of the things we have to keep in mind is not everything that we introduce is something that we come up with on our own. Some of it is you as constituents wanting us to put something into the system. And so we have to make certain we have some flexibility for that. And so I think that you're going to see some modification in this area that will make it a little bit more, I'm going to say fruitful in the sense of actually having people get serious about what they put in instead of just putting anything and everything in, because there's a cost. The guesstimation is anywhere, I've heard from $500 to $1,000 to write a bill up. So it just depends on all that. So you can see how that can be misused and abused. Todd, hang on one second. I'm going to go over here because I want to kind of blend up. We'll come back over here. And Todd, you'll be next.
Yes, I just wanted an update about a state law that passed years ago and how effective it hopefully will be, which is that when members of the state legislature have an excess of unauthorized absences that they cannot run again. And I hope that it is being effective, so I just wanted to find out your opinion, your observations of whether that's making a difference, so that the state can do its business.
Yes. So most of you are probably familiar that we had a couple of walkouts, and I'm going to be first to say it's not just the Republicans. The Democrats did this, fortunately, when I was not in the legislature, but they have used that same tactic or tool. But we have passed legislation that does, in fact, not legislation, rules within the Senate as well as rules in the House as to people being accountable for being representatives and showing up for work. And so this is pretty much what we have is working. We have not had any walkouts. My understanding, for the most part, there won't be any walkouts. Now, I hear that, but we've got another 2 or 3 months before we complete our work. And I wouldn't be surprised if you do have a walkout. But the way it's set up is if you have 10 unexcused absences, then you can be sanctioned into this law that basically says that you can't run for office immediately. You'd have to sit out a term and then come back in. And that was something that, the voters wanted us to do for accountability. And at this point, it seems to be working as planned.
I actually think part of that may have been something that went to the voters and that was approved by the voters and basically says that if you violate those rules around excused absences, that you can't run again. And it went through the court process and the Supreme Court upheld that. And so there are a number of, the ones that I'm aware of are senators who can't run again. And one of them is actually close to home here. Senator Cedric Hayden, who lives in Cottage Grove, won't be able to run again in 2 years because he was part of that last walkout. So that constitutional ballot measure was passed by citizens in Oregon. And I think we heard loud and clear that you want your state legislature to do their job and show up and do their job. And it has been upheld by the courts. And at this point, it seems to be working. They are being held accountable.
Yeah, so we actually have had people not been able to run. And what Lisa is saying regarding Cedric Hayden, he's midterm, so he gets to serve out the rest of the term. He won't be able to run again for the immediate term. He could sit out and then run again later, but he wouldn't be able to run. And then the question would be, could he go over to the House and run over in the House for a House position? And there's nothing that would prohibit that, that he would just not be able to run again in 2 years, as Lisa said, for the Senate seat. So Tom, we'll go with you, then we'll go over there.
Oh, I was just going to say, thanks for doing this town hall. I think things are going very well in Oregon compared with the rest of the country, and I'm grateful for that. My biggest worry is what's going on in Washington around Israel and the actual genocide going on. But more than that is that Israel is trying to drive the U.S. into war with Iran. Nothing we can do about that. But what I would like to ask, City of Eugene has a budget shortfall, and there was like 60 or 70 people at the last city council meeting about cahoots. And can you guys get us, another $30 or $40 million so that we can balance our budget?
I don't know if we can, we have that kind of spare change lying around to help the city balance their budget. And I think it's closer to, I think it's over 80 million that is the gap that they're looking at fixing. What I can say in regard to the situation with cahoots is that I think it's sad that that service is struggling, that we will no longer see their services being provided, and that they've had an impact on this type of trauma-informed emergency response care for behavioral mental health nationally, right? We saw that this model got taken to the national level and that it is being implemented across the United States. So they've had an impact, and they have a legacy that they can look to, that they have improved the lives of not only Oregonians, but also people across the country. So it's sad that they are no longer serving our community, but I think the place that is really important to focus is on making sure we continue to have access to those services, that we continue to have trauma-informed mental health response that doesn't include the police unless necessary. Though I can say that I had a situation in front of my home for about, I don't know, almost a month last summer, where there was somebody who was having psychotic episodes and living out of her car in front of my house. The car had broken down. It was challenging for myself and my neighbors. I think for the most part we dealt with it empathetically, but I got to see how well cahoots responded to that, but I also got to see how well our police officers responded. And I do think that They have improved and they have received a lot of training. And I was very, very impressed at the young woman who showed up to assist in that situation. So that being said, I think the focus needs to be at making sure that we still have these services in our community. They're very important. They also relieve the strain on other emergency response systems. And Lane County has effectively stood up a 24/7 trauma-informed emergency response for behavioral mental health. And they had been planning to use that to service the county outside of Eugene and Springfield. And they are rapidly responding to increasing that service, so they will continue to respond to Eugene as well. So those services are still available in our community. And my understanding is that a lot of the people who were working at Cahoots had already chosen to switch over to working with the county. And so many of the practices and the skill sets that were available through Cahoots will be available in this new service, and our community will still have the opportunity to benefit from these types of services.
Well, let me beg to differ. So here's the situation from what I know. First of all, Cahoots was brought in when I was on the Eugene Police Commission to actually come forward and provide this service. When we had them come into the city of Eugene, now for those who are not familiar with Cahoots, it's part of under the umbrella of Whitebird Clinic. Whitebird Clinic's been here since the 60s in some shape or forms in the late 60s. And so when they first came in and the city was looking at using them for the intervention, as Lisa says, which we feel is much more appropriate instead of having law enforcement deal with it, they had to have first the dispatch would send out uniforms. Uniforms would go out there and make certain it was safe, it was comfortable, then they would bring Cahoots in. Since then, it's transitioned into being directly 911 dispatched out. My problem right now is because the county has in fact started a mobile unit for mental health, and it was supposed to be for outside of the metro area. Cahoots had contracts for the city of Eugene and the city of Springfield. They're still going to be in Springfield, but they're going to be weaned off. And one of the reasons is because Lane County Behavioral Health Mobile Unit is now starting to be accessed and utilized in the city. My biggest concern with this is, and I've seen the memo that they issued for the dispatch, is that there's only one entity that you dispatch, that's Lane County. So let's just say, and I don't know if they've got more than one unit yet, more than one right now, but when I was working with them 3 months ago, they only had one unit. So if that one is out on a service call, they were not calling in Cahoots, who had an active team in the field that could have responded to a secondary location for another situation. This to me is a turf war. And this is something I am working on with the Lane County because I don't agree with that process. Now, there may be financial issues going on with Whitebird, so be it. But to basically take out and take away a unit that was actually available for citizens to actually have redress is wrong. Now, I will give Springfield, who's my city, Lisa makes up one of the districts that makes up Senate District 4. The other one is House District 7, John Lively. So he has basically Springfield. Lisa has the part that we described that's in Eugene and that. So my working with the police over in Springfield, they have embraced the work of Cahoots. They have seen how it actually gives them more resources to use for the problems they have, and they're going to maintain that contract, and I'm hoping that they will. The biggest problem is what came back as to needing the $80 million to fill the gap. These cities are looking at, hey, we don't have that money for that contract. We could use that money somewhere else, and so we're now going to use Lane County. And so this is one of those things that I think is very short-sighted. I really, really do hope that our city leaders will actually rethink where they're at and how they're dealing with this, addressing this, because we don't have all of the resources we need. And from my perspective, Lane County's mobile unit should be accessing outer areas, smaller communities outside of the metro for that work, instead of having this uncooperativeness of having another viable service available to citizens. And then the last thing I want to say is regarding everyone needs money, everyone. I mean, the biggest problem we have that we're dealing with is what is going to happen at the federal level. How many millions of dollars are going to not be coming into the state that have been coming into the state, be it for university research, be it for health and care, whatever it may be. We, the state, are not going to be able to fill all those voids. As much as we want to, as much as we believe in a lot of this, there's going to have to be some cuts. This is a tough cycle for us, and it's not going to get easy before we get out of here for the end of the session. Let's see, I think we're over here, and then Leslie will come back, and then.
Yeah, I'll try to be clear on this, but I tend to do it. Apologies. And it seems like we're hunkering down and using all our good, legal, strong defenses of this good life that we have here. But like you just mentioned, money connects beyond Oregon. My old understanding of civics is that the feds took care of the rest of the world and we paid our attention to what's happening in our state. And so all of the things that the feds have been doing to reduce our ability to work with international partners to make money in this state, to bring resources into the state, to sell blueberries and products out of the state. They're going to be affected. And the money problem that you mentioned, not only are the feds cutting off the money to the schools, but we are being blocked from doing business with the rest of the world because of money issues. So, at a state level, we are doing legal steps to protect things within our traditions and laws. And since we weren't separately contracting with other parts of the world, and we weren't going to the World Health Organization or having contracts with other countries that said, yeah, Oregon and China will continue to do business at these special rates, is there anything in the legislative activity that is pushing for more protections for our international relationships? I mean, we're working so hard on all the local problems, but we're losing access. We're going to be a brain drain. People are not going to come here. And our local police say we are a sanctuary state, but they're not clustering around our visitors as they come off the planes to protect them. They're not clustering around the students with visas being challenged to protect them. So I guess I'm looking for some information. Are we going to spread our Oregon wings internationally? Are we going to do more to get some money from them, from the outsiders? Please help us, people we need to lose. You know, is there another country that's going to donate? Because it doesn't seem like the people of Oregon want to pay more into the services that they're getting, and we're having less money. A lot of ramble there, but
Yeah.
answer what you will.
Well, I'm going to just say I'm not sure what we can do as a state when it comes on an international level. I mean, even though we may enter into negotiations with a foreign country for trade, we still have to worry about the tariffs and anything else that is happening at the federal level. If you're asking, can we do direct contracting with a foreign government and bypass the feds? I don't think so.
The way we can do it at a business level.
Like I said, I don't think so. I mean, business to business, you still have the international that where things are preempted. And I'm just not that versed in this area, but my first reaction is I don't see how a state can actually set up international trade that bypasses whatever federal rules and regulations are in place.
So I agree with the senator. We can't impact anything having to do with the tariffs, right? We don't have control over that. As one state, we don't have control over it. And it is very concerning. In terms of, I just read a report on the impact to our tourism industry. It will be significant. And that's not even about the tariffs. That's just how unpopular we've become in the world. People don't want to travel here right now. there are some things that we can do to promote positive, productive relationships, and they tend to be pretty in the weeds. And I'll give you an example of one. It's important to our higher education institutions that we still have international students coming here. It's not only important from a financial perspective, it's important from having a diverse community as well as the skill sets and opportunities that they bring. So we passed a piece of legislation out of the House Higher Education Committee that basically allows the TRUs, which are the technical regional universities, so not the big research universities like U of O, OSU, and Portland State. These are the smaller regional technical universities to enter into a relationship with countries like Taiwan and to agree to have a partnership with them for students to come here to learn that allows them to decrease the amount of tuition that they charge in these circumstances. So in an effort to increase or maintain the enrollment of international students, we are providing an opportunity for the universities to develop a program that has some flexibility, right? And there are other things that are being looked at to build partnerships, strengthen business relationships, but they're not things that can address what's happening at the federal level. I did want to loop back around to some of the conversation about the city and the issues around funding. This is going to be a really challenging budget process for the state, just like we're seeing at the city level, right? And when we talk about cahoots and the fact that that was one of the things that was on the chopping block because of the financial challenges the city is having, I'm speaking very directly to the fire fee and what is happening around that. It's not just cahoots, right? It's closing Amazon Pool. It's eliminating funding for neighborhood associations. It's eliminating funding for Parks and Rec for facilities like these. The list goes on and on. It's closing the library to 2 days a week, right? And so,
Greenfield.
and Green Hill. So, you know, the city is looking for a strategy to maintain these services that we know are really critical in our communities. Our community needs to decide if those services are important enough to them to consider how they want to vote on the fire fee, right? And then the whole fire situation is a whole nother conversation that has a long historical context and also has a future conversation that needs to happen. But coming back to the state level, there are things that could potentially happen with funding cuts at the federal level. The thing that I think we worry about the most is Medicaid cuts, right? There's not a possibility to address those cuts and to backfill them. So what we will need to do is think about how we're going to triage and prioritize, and some of that may need to look like community responses, right? Like, how do we come together as communities to respond and to triage to these types of circumstances? I feel very fortunate to live in Oregon and in Eugene, and I think that we have a community here that will respond to that. But there is another piece at the basis of all this, and cities are really highlighting this conversation, which has to do with a dysfunctional kind of structure of taxation within our state, going back to Measure 5 and Measure 30. And, you know, I'm not going to try to say that I understand that in intricacy, but I do understand how it has, over a long period of time, hampered the investments that we've been able to make in education. I've experienced that personally as an educator, and I see how it hampers our ability to fund other services in our state. So at some point, people in this state are going to have to be willing to have a very serious conversation about revenue reform. And that's also about the kicker. And I'm talking about the personal kicker, I'm not talking about the corporate kicker, but there is a big conversation here about where our values are in terms of, do we want certain services and programs to serve our communities? And we're also talking about things like roads and utilities. We're not just talking about the frills, right? But what kind of society do we want? And how are we going to fund the kind of society that we want? Who is next? Over here, yes.
Yeah, well, the whole money thing came out ahead of me, but that's kind of where I was too. I had a really hard time paying federal taxes this year. I just looked at that check and went, I can't send that to you, and I put it in a file folder. I don't know what the response of the federal government would be, but they fired so many IRS people, they may not fund it as long as I finish living. But I think that's a problem. I think giving all our money to the IRS and having them taking it all away from us, they've taken half of our human resources money. And we're not even talking about the environment now. We're not even addressing climate change. These are big things that are going to impact our children, our grandchildren, if we even make it that long. So I guess I'm just thinking of maybe some way to brainstorm, some way to divert federal taxes, because 50% of it or more goes to the military. A lot of us don't feel like that's a good deal. Don't want to support war. But people have to come up with what they want to support and what they don't want to support. And I don't know how to do these conversations. I've been an activist a long time, and I know that it's the 100 monkey thing, 100 monkey thing. If you have enough people to do it, it's going to work. If you don't, it won't. But I think we're in such a critical place now that people all have to be activists. They have to take risks. We have to make leaps. We have to do this. Or it's not going to stop fascism. So I just want to throw that out there.
Leslie,
Something
thank
for
you.
people to think about.
Yeah, thank you. So the person right behind you, yes.
I have concerns as an aging baby boomer that is a bulge of the population about our lack of a hospital in Eugene. I'm on the Southeast Neighborhood Transportation Committee, and we look into everything from our sidewalks, et cetera, to emergency route over 30th if there's an earthquake. City doesn't have that together. We've met with them several times. I think they need to bring in helicopters, but that's a whole nother issue. They think people are going to drive in there to clear out the bridges. The main issue is that a lot of people don't know when that University District Hospital is sold. I was interviewed by Peace Health about a week ago, and they are going to take away and move to Riverbend the lab, blood lab, the Oregon imaging, all the doctors in those offices, because that's all a package. So all that's going to move out of Eugene also. And I have friends who live in Veneta, and Eugene's our closest hospital compared to Florence. Now they go farther. From South Eugene, our son is a bus rider, and it's 3 buses to Riverbend. And it takes much longer, driving now too. So there are some ideas out there. Of course, it's money. I realize everything comes down to money. But have the legislature looked at it all? And I'm sure Eugene's not the only place facing this, but I talked to somebody that said they have 2 hospitals in Medford. I mean, we're the 2nd largest city in the state. And it just doesn't seem like anything's happening to get us a hospital. I mean, they talked about a research hospital, a teaching hospital years ago with OHSU and U of O, another hospital coming in, although I'll say I'm not for Kaiser because you'd have to have Kaiser insurance. But we need something. So we need some help.
Well, that's been one of the, I think, real thorny issues that we have as a community, not having a hospital here in Eugene. Just let's not only remember Riverbend, but there's also McKinsey-Willamette Hospital in Springfield that's been there for some number of years. There's been discussion. I understand. I don't have the particulars that there may be a possibility of another emergency room type of facility opening up here in Eugene. I have not really tracked that. I will tell you that the campus, the university campus, it is up for sale, and what they're talking about doing is selling what we see geographically, that multiple square block area, plus, as you said, across the street from Hilliard, where they have some of the professional industry. That's all owned by them. The Behavioral Health Center, the Johnson unit, is still intact and will stay there until they have something else, which is going to be out in the same area as Riverbend. It's going to be in the annex area, is what they're talking about. I will tell you, one of the things I have started looking at, because we have other crises for needs for hospitals. Let me just finish, I guess, on the other part about the use of the current facility. What we've been told, I don't have the engineering reports and all that, but to upgrade it, to bring it up to the level that it would need to be for a general hospital to be utilized is pretty cost prohibitive. And so, I'm not going to say I've checked the balance and all like that. But one of the things that I'm looking at is another area that we need assistance in is more bed space for the state hospital. And one of the areas is aid and assist, where individuals are charged with criminal offenses and they may have mental issues, sickness, to keep them from being able to move forward with a prosecution. And so what has to happen is those individuals are sent to the state hospital in Salem for analysis review and determine whether or not they are able to aid and assist. That might be a use for that facility, for the Eugene Riverbend Peace Health University Hospital to be converted for that type of approach. But it wouldn't help us on the general needs for medicine. If you're asking, is the state going to build a hospital here? I don't think so.
No, I'm not asking for that.
All right. So, I mean, the only way that we're going to get a hospital here is that some entity is going to come forward and do that. And is it going to be set up as a nonprofit as the current one was or is? Or is it going to be someone coming in for paid for profit type of funding? I don't know. It is, I will just say that myself, Paul Hovey, and others before Lisa came in had been assured as to that the University District Hospital would stay there and would maintain a presence in Eugene. And we can see that didn't happen. So it is one of those things that, it's hard for me to understand and believe that we find ourselves as the second largest city not having a 24/7 hospital to provide services here. And as you pointed out, there's unfortunately many things that could happen and natural disasters that could basically cut us off from the ability to get to a hospital here. And Peace Harbor, which is the hospital in Florence, it's also under the control and jurisdiction of Peace Health, has limitations as well. I mean, they can only do so much there, and not only is it 63, 65 miles depending on where you're at in Eugene to get there, many of those individual patients are actually transferred here because they cannot provide those services.
What has happened to the mental hospital or clinic or wherever it is out of Junction City? Is that still viable?
Yes, it's very viable. It's in use. I don't know if it's at full capacity, meaning they got all of the facility being utilized, but it's definitely being utilized as in its capacity as a state hospital.
Okay.
It's,
So in response to your question, I think it's a much more systematic issue, right? Earlier I talked about the vertical integration of our healthcare system, and what we see is consolidation of healthcare in that process. So I think that that is something that needs to be addressed. And that doesn't mean we're going to get a hospital here in Eugene. Like Senator Prozanski pointed out, we do have 2 hospitals in our metro area. We are a Springfield, Eugene metro area. We collaborate very well on many services. So I don't think we'll end up with another hospital, but Mackenzie Willamette is looking at standing up an emergency response center in West Eugene, so that part of the city has access to 24-hour emergency care. And I actually think decentralizing our healthcare is one of the approaches we need to be looking at. In other countries throughout the world, and 2 of which I have had the opportunity to live in, Venezuela and South Korea, healthcare is very decentralized. And you can walk to some type of healthcare clinic in your neighborhood where you can receive very comprehensive care, including x-rays or other types of services. And I think we need to look at decentralizing, because ask yourself if you think Peace Health functions like a nonprofit. I don't think Peace Health functions like a nonprofit, right? And so do we have the nuns still running Peace Health, which was originally started by the predecessor to Bushnell University, right? That, I can't even remember the name of that university, but they helped to start the university. What was it? Northwest Christian. Can always rely on Senator Prozanski for the historical context. And so they actually helped to stand up the hospital there, right? And that has always been a hospital. But, what I'm saying is I don't think Peace Health operates like a nonprofit anymore. So there are things that we need to continue to look at. Like, what does it truly mean to function as a nonprofit hospital? My understanding is that in Oregon, we don't have very good guidelines on that in state statute. There are other states in the country that have better guidelines on what it means to function and operate as a nonprofit. So I see this as a systemic issue, including to the point that we have 5 insurance systems that operate in Oregon, 5 insurance systems that healthcare professionals have to navigate, right? If we had a single payer, universal healthcare system, it would create efficiency and savings that I think would better serve our citizens. Now, how do we get there? I'm not an expert in that, but it seems like it makes sense to me. So I'll let you say what you want to say about it.
we're talking about socialized medicine. That's what we're talking about, and that's what, you had the opportunity in those 2 countries.
Yes.
And that's, James Manning will give him another plug, healthcare for all. He's been very, very out there as to that. We all support it. And the question is, can we get there? And that's the part that we have to have a discussion at the state level of where we're going to go. And, it's one of those things that other states have started looking at this and trying to approach it in some other areas. Clearly, it would be great to do it on a national level. I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's going to take a few states to actually get it going, incubate it, and make it move forward that way. So I'm just going to do a time check. We said noon would be our cutoff. It's about 11:30 now. So what I want to do is give everyone who has not had an opportunity to ask a question, and I'll say this, we're going to do that. If you are not ready to ask a question today, remember you can reach us through our offices, And I'm going to do one other thing before I won't forget at the end. Will you come in? So Will Gray is also with my office. He's a student intern with the U of O that's been with me for about 1.5 years, 2 years now. Almost three, see? They say the memory's the first thing that goes. And so Will's here helping out as well, and I want to thank them. And I know we're going to do this at the end, but I'm going to do it now because I see Peter in the back from the city of Eugene. Wayne is up on the front counter. They are the ones that actually are here to make it available for us. So we want to make sure we say thank you if we get lost in that. So why don't we go over here, and then we'll come back here, and then here.
Is it possible to get a second question after all the first questions if there's time?
Yeah.
I'd just like to revisit voter suppression.